42.
Let's toast 40 for 40. Last post for Basil Fawlty in 1979. Something of a table wine, as that Return of the Saint was to TV heaven sent, as well as, if anyone cares, off went Celebrity Squares. The liver birds ceased flapping, Sykes finally stopped yapping, as did dear George and Mildred. All those shows considered dead, and telly had to dim its lights, losing that twinkle of starlight we called Richard Beckinsale, far too young for that heart to fail. There were lots of new things, like Detective Eddie Shoestring, and Charles Endell Esquire rose from a birdie pyre. We met Arthur and Terry, new on that year's telly, and for a scarier drama there came the Omega Factor. Then Aphrodite inherited, tales became unexpected, Flambards was all the rage, whilst Telford had a change, Thomas and Sarah spun off, Sergeant Cribb went chasing toffs, Professor Quatermass had a blast, as Sapphire met Steel at last. Whilst of a lighter hue we got Give Us a Clue, and Terry's greatest prank was hosting Blankety Blank. In sitcom land our Audrey went toe-to-toe with Fawlty. Penelope, mistress of scorn, became too the manner born. Agony and Shelley too were both brand spanking new, whilst Mork met up with Mindy, which got imported for ITV. But ITV went out on strike, reduced to messages like, "There will be nothing, we say, upon this channel today." Another Terry met June, same shit, different living room. Now General Hospital was gone, Only When I Laugh came on. For alternative types of brews, up popped Not the 9 o'clock news, bringing satirical new enraptures, just in time for Maggie Thatcher. Sensible telly gave birth to Attenborough's Life on Earth, whilst Antiques got a roadshow, which is still going, don't you know. With nothing on t'other side, Doctor Who hit wild new highs, battling Scareth in Paris, alongside Lala, don't you see. Tom now had star power, opening up his book tower, but Buck Rogers was on his way for a fight some other day. The kids got to play jigsaw, those perishers seemed so poor, Dick Turpin knew no fear, and we met old Worzel, me dear. So that's 40 for 40, last post for Basil Fawlty. In 1979, something of a sparkling wine.
Hello!
Hello.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Lisa.
Welcome to episode 40.
Yes, around the archives.
40? How did we get to 40?
I don't know.
Just by sort of doing 39, I suppose,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
doing another one.
Yes, that would be it.
Anyway, we have a theme, don't
do,
we? Which we
we
gave
do.
away at the end of last time.
We should say thank you to Martin for the poem as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you to Martin.
Yes.
So our theme is 1979.
Yes, because obviously that's 40 years ago.
Yes, which was
Amazingly.
in the poem. So
Yes.
yes, you may have already guessed.
Yes.
But we've got a smorgasbord.
Oh, that's a good word.
That's a word that Martin used on the Shy Life
Okay.
podcast the other week. And we have a smorgasbord of things, don't
Okay.
we?
Yeah.
So we'll be doing a number of shorter
Yes.
articles,
Yes.
and then we've got other people doing slightly longer ones.
Yes. So you've got quite a lot of us this
Yeah,
time.
but there's a lot of variety this
Yes.
issue, I think.
Yes. If you don't like one thing, then I'm sure you'll like the next.
Yes. But let's just plug our videos as usual. Search for
Yes.
Lisa Parker or Round the Archives on YouTube and find out all about Are You Being Served and
Yeah.
Doctor Who and things like that.
Yeah.
And we've got the blog, which is still sort of going along slowly.
Just about, yes. And it recently had a lovely tribute to the late great Terence Dicks.
written by Warren.
By Warren.
Yes,
So,
indeed. So yeah, we've appeared on the Shy Life podcast a bit recently, so
Yes.
we'll point you in that direction. And if
Yes.
anyone wants to buy a mug off of our Redbubble shop, I'd
Yeah.
be very happy.
Yeah.
Please, somebody buy one. But so first up, Warren, thee, and me
Yep.
will look at the opening episode of season 2 of Grange Hill, which is very early on in 1979.
Yes.
Then Martin will take a look at the ITV Strike.
Yes.
So we'll see you after those things.
We won't see you, but
Well,
Yeah.
We might come round.
We'll be there after
We know where
those.
you live. Hello, Warren!
Hello, Lisa.
Hello,
Andrew.
Warren.
Welcome, everyone, to 1979.
How old were we?
Very young.
I was young.
I was... Well,
I was 7.
I was 9.
what we're going to do is a pick and mix thing. So
Yes.
I will have a birthday at some point in 1979.
Well, we'll all have a birthday at some point in
precisely.
1979. That's how it goes.
So, first of all, January 1979.
Yes.
Tuesday, the 2nd of January.
Yes.
And BBC One launches a new series of Grange Hill
Hooray!
at 10 minutes past 5.
After John Craven's news round.
A series in 18 parts. The start of a new term brings new faces, a new headmaster, and new problems, especially for Benny, who is suspected of stealing Grange Hill pupils.
Shoving Trisha Yates in his pocket.
That's what it says on Genome. Oh no, there is a full stop. He is suspected of stealing, full stop, Grange Hill pupils, and then the list of pupils.
I don't think I would have seen this series. I think I would have been a bit too young.
Well, if it's January 79,
I was 6.
I would have been 10. So I definitely saw
And I
Early
remember,
Grange Hill.
I remember the episode we watched.
Yeah. But I think this was knocking around on VHS at some point.
I think it was. I think I might have seen it
it?
on VHS.
There was a compilation
right.
release of
Yeah.
it, but
Okay.
you've got the DVDs of the individual episodes, haven't you? Warren?
Yes.
I didn't even know it was on DVD.
Yeah,
I did know because I think Matt West was talking about because they've got so far, and he was wondering if they'd do any.
yeah, they're up to
more.
season 6.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, it was just really nice to see Bullet Baxter.
oh, we love Bullet
Bullet
Baxter.
Baxter.
Which is weird because when I was actually at secondary school, I hated my well, I didn't hate. I hated and feared my PE teacher.
So did I, yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's really nice.
Yes.
He's firm but fair.
With his pen, with
With his pens.
with his pens,
With
in
his
coat
pens.
pocket.
Why has he got pens? He's a PE teacher. He's
might
got
need
a
to write
pocket
stuff
full
on
of
kit.
pens. Or kids. The back of kids.
Grange
But he
Hill.
was really officious, but there was just something about Bullet Baxter, wasn't there?
But this episode, it's the start of a new term, and I presume this is meant to be that like September then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is September 78 or September 79.
Ooh.
What's the Grange Hill dating
78. Oh,
Controversy.
controversy?
Yeah.
That's the thing, because although this is January, it's clearly not January in the
No, because
outside, is it?
they've got a football match at one point, and all the mums are watching with short sort of t-shirts and short sleeves.
Yeah, I
on,
noticed
so,
that.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
But the new headmaster's introduced a new timetable, and
Yes.
he's moving people about
yes, and
between
it's all
forms.
it's all
Barney's
gone a
gone
bit
to
weird.
rubble, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So who's the new headmaster?
It's
Sean Arnold.
Arnold.
Sean Arnold, who plays Barney Crozier in Bergerac.
So yeah, when you said you brought season 2, I assumed it was Mrs. McCluskey, but it's
No.
not.
Mrs. McCluskey doesn't come until a
Till
bit
later,
later.
I
doesn't
think
she?
she's about. She might be season 4, I think.
Don't know.
Yeah. Bridget the Midget.
Yes,
Mm.
indeed. But do you like remember the layout of school? Because
Yes.
it's starting to get fuzzy for me, to be honest. Because you said there was a corridor that reminded you of the English corridor
Yes.
at QE.
Yeah.
So it described the sort of English block. I'm trying to think where it was.
If the main hall in QE, where we had the headmaster's office, deputy head, then at the end there was the stairs up to the staff room,
Right.
and then there was the corridor behind you that went down to the first aid block and business studies.
Yeah.
And to the left, you walk down, the classrooms are on the left-hand side. Those were the English classrooms.
Right.
And on the right...
What numbers were they? Because there was K block, which
K
was
block's
maths, and L block, which had the library in. I remember that.
and the giant fire escape,
Yeah.
and the art department on the ground floor.
Yeah. Because I haven't been back to any of my schools.
It's been demolished, totally demolished. You wouldn't recognise it.
All right.
The only thing that's recognisable is the main hall. They kept the main hall at the school.
All right, because you've been back to your school. Didn't
I went back
'cause
once.
Didn't
yeah.
I go with you? Or
Yes,
something?
I think I took you to a school reunion with
Yeah.
me, and the first thing I did
Was apologise.
was go to the library
Yeah.
to see if the Doctor Who books were still there, and they had some Target Doctor Who books.
Way! Were they there?
I don't know if they were the same ones, but they did
Did they?
have
Oh,
some Target
brilliant.
Doctor
That's
Who books.
brilliant.
Uncle Terence was there.
Oh,
But in this one, all the classes keep going to the wrong places, or
Yes.
they're double booked for swimming or things like that.
Or gymnastics.
And do you ever remember things like that happening? When you had your new timetable, did you ever go to the wrong place?
no, it's really easy to get around the school, I thought.
Yeah,
Especially because we were in blocks, separate blocks, so
Yeah.
that was easy to... So if you were going to the science block, that was G block.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also sort of interesting to see a little bit of home life of the pupils. And you said this is sort of proto EastEnders, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is really,
Because
yes.
in this episode, Benny's accused of stealing,
Yeah.
isn't he? Because he finds a 50p.
Yeah.
And then somebody is lost a 50p later on. I think it's sort of, as they say, it's quite circumstantial evidence,
Yes.
isn't it?
Because it could be anybody's 50p.
Yeah.
Because he was...
They're not marked, are they?
No,
No.
he was the last to come out of the change room.
Yeah.
What surprised me about the 50p is how big it was.
Yes.
I said it was a doubloon when
Yeah.
he picked it up.
Because it's almost covers the whole palm of his hand. It's huge.
And the value of the coin then
was
compared to
much more.
much more
Yeah.
than it is now, yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how small Benny is as well.
Yes,
it
I
is.
forgot how small
Yeah,
he was,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because I can't quite sort of work out what age they're meant to be. Have you got
Well, if this is the second series,
yeah.
and they started the school in the first series,
Yeah.
you've got to assume they're around 12.
It's comprehensive, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I mean,
We start
12,
at 11, so...
Do you
Yeah.
comprehensive? Well, we
Yeah.
were 13 when we started comprehensive, weren't we?
Yeah, but you went to middle school, didn't you?
Ah,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Middle school is different to comprehensive. I went to comprehensive school when I went there when
No,
I was
went
11.
we went to comprehensive. QE was comprehensive,
Yeah.
and that was a 13 age start.
But that was described as middle school,
Yeah.
Okay.
wasn't it? Which is different. So how long did you stay on at junior school for?
It would have been like
Till 9.
3 years
So in
at first school, 4 years at middle school, and 3 years at QE.
comprehensive,
Yeah.
Yeah, QE. The earliest you would have left QE would be at age 16 at the
That's
end
right.
of your third year there, wouldn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
See,
So-
And then you were going to the sixth form.
Yeah.
I was 5, I think, when I went to infant school. And I did infant school and junior school, and I left junior school when I was 10, because I wasn't 11 till the August.
No.
Right.
And then I did 5 years at senior school.
Yeah.
So it was a different. It's just different areas have different school
weird,
systems,
yes.
unless it's a grammar school.
Yeah.
Then you did your 11 plus to get into grammar school.
They didn't do that around where I lived.
Yeah,
There
because
weren't really
I
many
would have
grammar
gone to
schools.
QE age 13.
That's right, because
Yeah.
it's 9 to 13 at
Yeah.
Cranwell Middle School.
Yeah.
I would say that this particular comprehensive is not going to be like that because it's
Yeah.
an inner city London school.
Yeah.
So they're going to start at 11. So I'm
Yeah,
going to say
no, I
they're
can go with
12.
that. I can go with that.
Yeah.
Because I can very much relate to this school. This school is not dissimilar to the school I went to.
Do you relate to the pupils in any way? Do
In
any of us relate to
some
the pupils,
ways.
do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So watching as a child, because they always say you watch children acting and you always wince.
yeah.
But when you watched it originally, were you comfortable with the way child actors were portraying children at school?
Well, it's interesting. I certainly didn't identify with Tucker Jenkins
No.
because he was the naughty one.
and there was only one flipping neck in this.
yeah, You were doing a count of
Count,
flipping
and I was
X, weren't you?
disappointed.
I think of all the sort of characters, and I've got the list of who's in this one, I think Justin Bennett was the nearest one to me because he was the slightly sort of weedy, bookish one. And he only got sort of one line.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But I guess sort of, sort of Tucker or Benny are like the sort of the main ones, aren't
Yeah.
they? And other ones like Alan Humphreys.
It's
might
sort of
remember.
peripheral,
I was
isn't
the
it?
Alan
Yeah.
Humphreys character.
Yeah.
But yeah, you also remember Trisha Yates as
Yes.
well, with a mostly made of hair, isn't
Yeah,
she?
she must. Yeah. But because I obviously, as I said, I was only sort of 6, 7 when this series was on, and so I remember I came to it later in the sort of early 80s. So very much, and we have to mention Mr. Bronson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very much in the Mr. Bronson era. So I sort of identified with Roland because he used to get bullied, and although I didn't get bullied a lot, I got bullied a bit, so I could appreciate what was happening to him. So he's my identification point for Grange Hill, Roland.
Yeah, right, okay.
So,
but yeah.
It was interesting the way Phil Redman writes, and the way the actors who were playing teachers portrayed their roles. None of it was played down because it's a children's programme. It was played straight, and for the children, it was played straight.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much in the case of Phil Redman's writing, that they bought into that. They can see that he's going for something drastically new then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it caused so much problem for the BBC with parents and teachers writing in saying this is horrible and how dare you show children, and other people going, this is too close to reality, you shouldn't be showing this to our kids, it's giving us idea. If you remember in seasons to come where they have the protest march in a school uniform.
What's it, SAG, isn't
SAG,
it?
that's it,
School Action Group or
That's
something.
it, yeah.
But there's that infamous sketch in The Young Ones. Come off it, Mr. Liberal. We're the only kids on television who don't say and then cut away.
Yeah.
But I quite like the production of it because the insides of the classroom are on studio videotape, and it's almost like this classroom is surrounded by film.
There's no escape.
So yeah, I mean that was really enjoyable to go back.
It was a nice scene setter for that.
And you say it's perfectly watchable back.
Yeah.
It really doesn't sort of patronise you or anything.
And there's
like that.
no performances that you wince at.
No.
All of the sort of
Even Mr. Golightly.
Mr. Golightly, who is a little bit stereotypical of that kind of of teacher. Not that we had
Blazer
that
wearing
kind of teacher.
ex-military teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we did have a teacher who used to throw board rubbers at people.
Oh, we had to have a teacher that threw chalk at people.
I'm told.
Miss Sadler Smith, her name was. But
And
I won't tell you her nickname.
He threw his radio out the window once because England lost at cricket, which rather destroyed the point, really.
Mr. Bayes used to smoke his pipe in class.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And he used to smoke it whilst reading The Hobbit to us, which I thought was...
That's very appropriate.
Like Gandalf.
Very appropriate, and none of us thought anything. So when you went into your next lesson and you smelled of tobacco, the teacher just said, "You have Mr. Bayes, didn't you?" We went, "Oh yes," and nobody batted an eyelid that
You
he was
wouldn't get away
smoking.
with that in those days.
Wow, good. Anyway, we'll move on to the next thing in our pick and mix.
Absolutely.
So pull something else out of your sack, Warren.
I shall indeed. I'm having a rummage.
See you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
I've been struggling to come up with anything original to say about television in 1979. Let's see what's on telly. BBC One. Well, there's nothing new I can say about that. BBC Two.
Candida Lysett Green explores the infinite variety of the front garden tonight at 7:30.
Everyone's got an opinion on that. ITV. I believe there's a new Quatermass serial. We are sorry that programmes have been interrupted. There is an industrial dispute. Transmissions will start again as soon as possible. In the multi-channel, multimedia 21st century, it's sometimes difficult to imagine the three-channel world in which I grew up. Just as it's difficult for me to imagine the one-channel world of a decade before I popped into being, or even that lost world without television in which gathering round pianos for sing-songs were the home entertainment option of choice. And yet, in the second half of 1979, even the relative riches of those three channels were curtailed by the arrival of a long-running daily transmission on ITV called The Strike. To the casual viewer, the plot was relatively straightforward, with one of several varieties of plain blue caption cards bearing the minimal information of the ongoing story, pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 10 weeks. Now, I'm sure you'll agree, it's quite a commitment to minimalist broadcasting, even during those relatively rich times where experimental arts programmes could still make it to air even during prime time. And, of course, it did mean that programmes on the other channels did benefit hugely from drawing in the viewers who were less than taken with such fare, and preferred the familiar cocktail of 321 and Coronation Street to fill their evening hours. During those 10 long ITV-less weeks, Doctor Who gained record viewing figures for the story City of Death, and new shows like Shoestring and To the Manor Born became the huge, popular, well-remembered hits that they were, which they might not otherwise have done simply because, well, there was nothing else on, and video cassette recorders hadn't come down enough in price to become the ubiquitous household items that they would in the next decade. Although, even though these were still times in which television was simply not a 24-hour service, and test cards and test cricket could fill several hundred daytime hours when you were a bored school kid during the holidays, and a full 1/3 of potential programming was simply unavailable, you do actually find yourself wondering whether the BBC could have put out any old rubbish in the evenings and still got 18 million viewers. And of course, at that time, ITV had on its shelves quite a few shows just aching to be broadcast during that profitable autumn season. Apart from that prestigious new Quatermass serial from Euston Films starring Sir John Mills, other drama shows like the new Sapphire and Steel stories and the Budgie sequel, Charles Endell Esquire, and Minder were waiting to be launched onto an unsuspecting public alongside light entertainment programmes like 321 and Only When I Laugh. Some series survived the delay in transmission. Others suffered badly from it, got sneaked out eventually in a much reshuffled schedule, and never gained the audiences that they might have expected or hoped for. The strike itself came about for several reasons, not least that striking was pretty much the in thing at the end of the 70s, especially at the latter end of the Callaghan government. You'll have heard about or even remember that whole winter of discontent thing before incoming Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher pretty much gutted the unions over the next few years. Some people, of course, maintain that's a good thing, especially when they can't get to work because of industrial action, but even in such times as we live in nowadays, what other power does an ordinary worker have other than to withdraw their labour, the one thing that they have that has value to their oppressors? Still, we're not going to focus here on the rights and wrongs of union action, merely to observe quite what was going on in the latter half of 1979 when 1/3 of our telly got taken away from us. There was, of course, far less sympathy for telefolk than those working in heavy industry, as the arts, with a capital A, were still very much considered a bit of a namby-pamby way for folk to earn an honest crust, and when people were spending 12-hour shifts digging coal or welding rivets or making steel, you might very well wonder what on earth these people had to complain about in their cushy little world. And yet the disputes kept on coming, with various strikes across the BBC about shifting ladders and so forth, blanking out programmes from time to time, and these would still go on throughout much of the 80s. So what was it about the 1979 strike that made it seem so significant and so memorable, apart from one of the first generations to truly be brought up being drip-fed on television on a daily basis, having memories of their favourite shows vanishing for much of the summer holidays, and long into the first term of the new year? It became, after all, the costliest, bitterest, and by some margin the longest dispute in the history of the collection of broadcasters known as ITV, and standing on those picket lines were several of the figures who later became high-flying executives in the TV industry themselves. Financial inflation in the 1970s was, quite frankly, terrifying and went on year after year after year. In the mid-1970s, it peaked at just under 25%, meaning that production costs for television programmes just kept on rising and rising at a rate that budgets set the previous year couldn't help but fail to keep up with. After all, as an employee, if your shopping cost a quarter more, you were going to put in a pay claim that at least kept pace, even though the government wanted to put in restrictions on the size of those pay claims to break the cycle. Across the board, ITV were in general making various small fortunes during what was a golden period for them in terms of popular programme making, share price increases and massive profits, and their shows were constantly doing far better in the ratings than the BBC's were, and in those simpler times they were getting a lot of advertising revenue from their customers, because ITV, despite what people tended to suggest, was never a free service. Part of the purchase price of every tin of Heinz beans or Nimble bread or whatever went towards paying for those adverts, simply in a way that customers simply didn't notice, really. Or, in some cases, granny, understand. Anyway, The more expensive everything got, the more they could rake in, and, well, you get the picture. And the reason you were getting that picture was that the people making those programs and putting out the signals and all of the 101 things that made that happen were members of various unions such as EETPU, ACTT, and NATTKE. Sometimes you really do need to know your act from your eat poo. So here goes. Eat poo was the Electrical, Electronic, Telecommunications and Plumbing Union, and they kind of did all of their fiddly electronic-y things in the studio that got stuff made and aired, and they were considered a fairly moderate bunch. The ACTT was the Association of Cinematograph, Television and Allied Technicians, and they were led by the militant Alan Sapper. NATTKE was the National Association of Theatrical, Television and Kine employees, and they were the third of this big three broadcasting unions involved. In 1979, with inflation at the relatively healthy 13 and a bit %, ITV offered 9%, which got rejected. The counter-offer from the unions was 25% to compensate its members for the real-world erosion of wages during all those years of near 25% inflation. You get the picture. Or rather you don't. War to the death. And so, on July 23rd, there was a national one-day strike by members of Eat Poo and Natki unions, and all ITV regions went dark except for two, Westwood and Channel. In the other companies, Eat Poo members had switched off equipment that ACTT members refused to switch back on again and operate, and therefore no television programmes could be made or broadcasts. These were those such times, demarcation and the specifics of which people did which jobs, and if you touched that, we're all walking out. It may seem strange now, but that is how things worked, and to a certain extent how jobs were protected. And it could cost an absolute fortune to have such a large and yet broadly mono-skilled workforce. Of course, looking back now, some of those jobs might seem ridiculous, but I don't suppose any of us feel that way if it's our job that somebody else is deciding might be done better or more efficiently by someone else. Negotiations trundled on until the 6th of August. Only staff at Southern Television wanted to accept late July's 15% pay offer, and Eat Poo ramped up the pressure by starting a work to rule. This meant not working overtime, and because telly required a lot of overtime, broadcasting as it did in unsociable hours, well, if you worked in television, that is, because somebody had to switch those switches as the nation sat down to relax of an evening. So the management stepped in to cover the absent Eat Poo members, and at Thames Television, the ACTT membership refused to work with those managers who were filling in for their union colleagues, which got the ACTT shop steward and his deputies suspended, and because of that, the whole of the ACTT walked out, and Thames Television was blanked out. A similar situation involving management-built lighting rigs causing a health and safety risk blacked out HTV, and Southern was temporarily blacked out due to overtime ban issues, but in that case the ACTT members allowed the management to step in and pictures were restored for a while at least. However, heels, as they say, were being dug in. Trenches were being dug, and a long dispute spent staring across the no-man's land of various executive car parks was becoming inevitable. The staff of ITN walked out on August the 9th, and by Friday the 10th, the entire ITV network went dark, apart from Channel Television, which had been struggling anyway and negotiated a deal so that it managed to stagger through with local programming and feature films. Early attempts at arbitration came to nothing, and playing hardball, ITV, or as it was then the ITCA, basically threatened to sack the lot of them if they weren't back by the 23rd. The ACTT refused to be threatened and would not negotiate, and so for the next 10 weeks, apart from in the Channel Islands, ITV basically displayed local variants on that message I quoted earlier, some of which became like old friends to households who would never watch the BBC under any circumstances because the rating monitoring service did mention discernible numbers tuning in to that almost blank screen and the music playing alongside it. Perhaps it was soothing, comforting even, less harsh than the radio if you wanted to do some knitting. Or maybe people simply thought if they waited long enough, the programmes would be back on eventually. 10 weeks! 10 flipping weeks! People were still used to transmission breaks and the potter's wheel, and perhaps, just perhaps, thought that this was a similar thing, and if they just hung on, they might be the first to make that telephone call to great Aunt Mabel saying, "Telly's back!" I also imagine that during this time some people even tried out that toffee-nosed BBC 2 for the first time, just to see if there was anything else on worth watching, at least for a while. There was little sign of wobbling on the side of the workers during what is looked back upon as a fairly friendly dispute in comparison to the all-out warfare witnessed on the picket lines at Wapping or the gates of the collieries. Games of football still being played by executives and any strikers, union strikers that is. Well, those still available to make up teams who hadn't taken temporary jobs in the restaurants the executives ate at or off painting their houses for them. LWT apparently even used to let strikers picket indoors on rainy days so that they wouldn't get wet. In late October, the pay offer was increased to 17.5%, backdated to July, with promises of more jam tomorrow of 7.5% in January and then 15% the following July. Huzzah! Up the workers, power to the people, etc. However, as is often the case, there were caveats, a price to be paid, concessions to be made. Working practices would have to change, presumably of the anyone who wants to can shift that wretched ladder variety, and such ladder shifting might be combined with lighting rigging as one person's job instead of two. Electronic news gathering was to be adopted, so that the news could become all shiny and modern and not involve old news hounds with paper-based notepads and pencils lurking around in seedy bars trying to find out what the hell was going on. In the end, such things were accepted, albeit on a locally negotiated level, and in that agreement we find the roots of our modern 24-hour rolling news coverage, where the same facts and or opinions are bellowed at us by freezing reporters standing in front of nondescript buildings every 15 minutes or so until something else happens. Also, the unions at that time were very aware that the ITV franchise renewals were just around the corner, and as some very familiar logos were destined to vanish forever, they very much wanted no redundancy clauses to be in place so that the broadcasting job's cake could both be had and eaten. Anyway, at the end of the 10-week dispute, the strikers voted overwhelmingly to go back to work for what some sources claim was effectively a 45% pay rise. Well, you would, wouldn't you? Ironically, several of those who ended up becoming bigwigs in the television industry themselves were amongst the many manning the picket lines during that dispute, although some just went on holiday and others, with futures spent bean counting at the BBC, had made sure that their careers would be undamaged, despite going out on strike. And then the strike was all over. The BBC's last brief period as being, once again, the nation's sole broadcaster, like it had been in the old days before 1955, was gone, and with new franchises about to be issued, and shiny new channels coming along, and extended broadcasting hours heaving into view over the horizon, things really would never be the same again. Noel Gordon, as Meg Mortimer, got to speak directly to camera and let the viewers know what had been going on at Crossroads while the viewers had been away. Not a lot, presumably. And Julie Goodyear and Peter Adamson, as Bet Lynch and Len Fairclough, tripped across the old cobbles of a previous incarnation of Coronation Street to have a good old gossip over what had been going on up their end. So instead of killing off the soaps forever, they were back, and in one case at least, on its way to becoming the ratings behemoth that finally kicked Doctor Who to the curb within a decade and spawned the BBC voices to think, we'll have some of that, and with EastEnders before half of that decade had passed. And as ever, there is always a cost. Not just in the revenue received by the ITV companies. Actors and journalists, especially those working at the TV Times, lost wages, and in many ways these were the innocent bystanders who suffered most because of this dispute. Well, along with those of us awaiting the resolution of that Sapphire and Steel story set in the railway station and all those soap opera fans, and you get the point. And perhaps weirdly, the BBC suffered too, because, well, suddenly everyone became acutely aware that they broadcast a heck of a lot of repeats in the late summer and early autumn, something they apparently were completely oblivious to until someone took ITV away. You might even suggest that the BBC had pretty much thrown in the towel just as the champ was being counted out in the opposite corner, or something. And whatever changes were looming in the television industry were bound to affect them too. So, because the world unravelled so much under James Callaghan that it allowed Margaret Thatcher to rise to power, one of her missions was not allow it to unravel further on her watch. 1979 was, after all, the first year of her watch. And here she was, with blank TV screens and the strike by the printers at the Times newspaper group pushing that Murdoch chappie into the great Wapping experiment. So the lady was not happy at all. Mrs. Thatcher basically wanted to reduce the power of the unions by outlawing secondary picketing, where pickets from one workplace could stand outside, threaten and intimidate, if you will, another workplace. Bringing an end to closed shops, a workplace where it was compulsory to join the union to do the job, and introducing mandatory secret ballots so that strikes had to be properly voted upon before anyone could call Everybody out! The unions tried again at Thames 4 years later, but found out that Thames could still get programmes broadcast, mainly because of the new single-operator cameras that the management could operate if necessary, and the fact that they could grab other shows from the other regions and transmit those instead. The TVAM strike, 4 years after that, was the last hurrah of the television unions managing to attempt to shut down a TV station, and with TV superstars, rat fans, crossing the picket lines, and managers stepping in, and then implying that the camera operators were basically unskilled labour and the television stations basically ran themselves, the unions basically lost. And so, especially with that 80s thing of private enterprise, meaning that there were a lot more small independent programme makers out there, the television unions never again had the strength they had enjoyed in the 60s and 70s, and because all these changes really mean that it simply couldn't happen now, 1979 was the last time ITV suffered a national blackout because of industrial action. And if it was, given the plethora of choice nowadays, would anyone even notice?
Well, Warren, I didn't expect you to put out a dick at this point.
Well, gadzooks and stab me vitals.
For you have shown us your Dick Turpin.
I have shown you Big Dick.
Yeah.
We have Dick Turpin too. We just not got around to watching it yet.
The 6th of January 1979.
Yeah, it's all about January at the moment.
Episode 1, Swiftnick. Sir John Glutton, that's a good name.
Yes.
Aided by his steward, Captain Spiker tries to evict Mrs. Smith and her son from their inn, the Black Swan. Can Dick Turpin help them?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But, end of the episode then,
yeah,
isn't it?
But created and written by Richard Carpenter.
Yes.
And directed by Charles Crichton, no less.
Yes.
Gosh.
And as you said, Warren, all done on film.
All phlegm.
Yes.
Now, I don't remember watching it.
Don't you?
No, so tell me about your memeries of...
This is a
Of watching
Saturday
this,
night
Warren.
staple, this was.
Yeah.
Beans on toast and Dick Turpin. I remember when I got it solely because I remembered it as a child. Started watching the first episode and it came back like a flood.
All right.
But yeah, warm memories of sitting down watching Dick Turpin. Yeah.
So, Lisa, what did you think of it historically then?
Well, yes, I have to say historically, it's probably not the closest to reality because Dick Turpin wasn't a noble outlaw as he's made up to be.
But
in
this isn't that Dick Turpin. That's the thing.
No.
They pulled a nice thing in that the bloke that was hanged
Yeah.
is the bloke that took the name of Dick
Turpin.
Turpin.
Yeah.
Because you can see that Richard Carpenter's setting him up as a sort of Robin Hood figure.
He is.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
You can see that
You
thing.
know, stealing from the rich for the poor.
But he wasn't like that one
No.
bit. No.
And
No.
you've got your sort of Sheriff of Nottingham.
Yes.
Character in Sir John Glatton.
Yeah.
Well, no, yeah. I suppose
Well,
the
it's
Sheriff
sort
of
of-
Nottingham would be Spiker and
Yeah.
Sir John would be Prince John.
Because Dick Turpin is Richard O'Sullivan.
Yes.
A great fan of Richard's
Yes.
work.
Yeah.
He's always cheeky in the way he does
He's also
things.
doing
is.
Robin's Nest at this point
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So he's really busy.
He's busy. Sir John Glutton is Christopher Benjamin.
Yeah.
And Spiker is David Dacre.
Hey, brilliant, isn't
I was
it?
just looking at the sort of list of guest actors on here as well. And you
Oh, there's
get
loads.
people like Donald Pleasance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dinah Dawes with
Yeah.
her assets on show.
Indeed.
Yes.
Patrick McNee's in it.
Yeah.
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 Playing Steed.
Really?
Yes.
Pretty much so.
But yes, the one style acting, yes. I think Windsor Davies is in one or two of them, actually.
Okay, well, I can see what appears to be Joan Sims.
Oh, yes,
a
Joan's in it,
picture
yeah.
of on the back there. So, you know, as Richard Carpenter series go, it's probably just the one I haven't watched, really.
Okay.
It's weird, because, you know, I've seen Catweasel, I've seen Ghosts of Motley Hall, I've seen a bit of Robin of Sherwood, but not this at all.
Had you seen any?
I don't think I have. I think we do have it. It's not actually that. This is the first time I've seen an episode. I remember the cartoon strip, the comic strip that was in Looking
Yes.
more than anything else.
Yes.
So I might have seen it, but I have no strong memories of it.
So watching this for the first time, putting aside the historical inaccuracies, perhaps they're playing with history. How did you rate that?
I quite enjoyed it. Yeah. Yeah, and the ardent lefty in me was enraged by the landowning gentry. So Christopher Benjamin, much as I love him, got what he deserved. So
it's just the name Glutton as well.
Yes.
It's brilliantly sort of chosen name.
I like they've done their homework as to locations and settings, and I said there's everything. There's nothing there that was anachronistic there, was there?
No.
And
it looks dirty and
they haven't cleaned it up like a polished sort of fake, not fake, but some productions are more emphasis on the acting, less on the surrounding. But there's a lovely little bundle that goes together there.
And as you said, having this first episode done by a film director as well.
Really
Charles
helps.
Crichton is a very seasoned film director by the time he comes to do television,
But I guess that's like Worzel Gummidge.
Yeah, James Hill.
He's also shot on film. So you can
James Hill's a Bond director.
Yeah. So you can see that for what is, a sort of tea-timey family audience thing, the people you've got working on it are fairly sort of heavyweight people, aren't they?
And LW2, they're in partnership with another firm, and I can't remember who it is.
Yeah.
Gate Tarn.
Yeah, are very much on the money. I think they are. They put a lot of investment in this because this is going to be. It's running almost opposite Who, isn't it? What time have we got? Have we got a transmission time?
I can't tell you without going through all my PDFs. Sorry,
I can't remember the time. I think it was Who on one channel, and you'd switch over, and it's Dick Turpin on the other.
Okay,
I'm not sure. They might have slightly overlapped, but they're really going for the Saturday evening family audience, aren't they?
But Lisa, you wanted to say about
yes. Well, there's
the real Dick Turpin.
The real
briefly.
Dick Turpin, who was hanged in York. We've seen a reproduction of his cell when we went to the York Castle Museum.
Yes,
yeah. And he was caught and he wasn't a very nice man because he'd been with a gang of other thieves and he'd basically left them to hang and sort of run away. And he was caught because he sent a letter, I think, to his mother or to somebody. And the postman that delivered the letter was the man that taught him to write.
Good grief.
And he recognised the hand and could tell him, even though he didn't obviously sign it,
Yeah.
Dick Turpin, he recognised the hand and went, hang on a minute, that's Dick Turpin's writing.
Because Horrible Histories have done a very good
A great song.
Adamant spoof.
Not Adamant.
Adamant.
Not Adamant.
I was going to say Adamant didn't do many pop songs, did he?
Adamant.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically Prince Charming is Dick Turpin.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's fabulous.
We'll have to show you that one.
We will.
It's really rather good.
Yes.
And I mean, I wouldn't say it's a spoof as such. It's not a black fingernail, is it?
No. Well, that's Black Fingernails, Scarlet Pimpernel anyway.
Is it really?
Yes.
Didn't know that.
Yes.
Marvellous.
Big Dick is Carry On
Big Dick
Dick.
is Carry On Dick.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
But have you actually watched any more of these?
Yes,
or not?
I have.
Yeah.
I've watched some of the later ones as well.
Oh,
Yeah, because
right.
there seems to be a theme in the last series.
Yes, there is.
Is that to do with the American War of Independence or
there
something?
is a running theme on that, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's called Dick Turpin's Greatest Adventure, and it seems because it's got episode numbers.
I'm
episode
not sure there are 50-minute
1 to
episodes. I think they're 50 minutes. A while since I've watched them.
For episode 4 from the 6th of June 1981, it says viewers will notice a drop in quality for several minutes during episode 4. While the best available materials have been used to source this DVD, circumstances necessitated the use of a lower quality recording for part of this
Because
episode.
it doesn't exist in its entirety.
Oh, right. Okay. You looked that up, did you?
Yes.
Good man. So what happened to it then?
No, I'm wondering
Did the
whether
tape mangle up
I'm
or
wondering
something?
whether it's water damaged or it's damaged.
Because
alongside-
it's going to be on a film recording, isn't it?
Yeah.
A film reel, yeah.
So it's either going to be age damage.
Yeah.
That's it didn't specify. It
Oh,
just said
that's-
a certain
if
amount
anybody-
of footage is not existing.
If anybody
yeah.
knows, give
Yes,
us some
let
more
us know.
details. I'm
Yes.
sure somebody will know.
I'm sure they will.
But it's always good to have it. It's something that isn't quite 100%.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
As you always say to me, you appreciate these things more if you're having to go to slightly dodgy copies every now and then. Because, 1979 is a long time ago now.
Yes, although it doesn't seem to us in our heads, though, does it?
No.
And there is still a fair amount of material from 1979 for which no recordings exist. So
Which seems ridiculous.
I know it sounds daft,
Yeah.
but there is stuff that we've watched during our lifetime that doesn't exist anymore. which is
We're walking historical.
So if you could just plug your head into my mind probe,
Heavens.
I'll suck out a few missing episodes of things.
Who misses?
But
But
yeah.
Saturday night was definitely a night for Dick.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes. So yeah, that was a. Thank you for showing that to us, Warren.
Yes.
Pleasure.
And we will have to dig out a copy and watch some more.
Yeah. I wonder what other surprises you have in store for us.
I'll have a look at my
We
last
shall
sack.
find out. Bye bye.
Bye. Why does it always have to end with a boom?
Are you seriously asking why a dick has got to end in a bum?
Yes.
That'll make Warren spit his tea out.
Yes.
Thank you very much to Martin
Yes.
for his lovely piece. Martin
Yes.
will return later.
Yes.
Warren will also return later.
He will. Yes.
But in sort of answer to the question about where does Dick Turpin fit into the schedule,
Yes.
and I said I've got to go through my PDFs.
Yes.
But I've gone through my PDFs and I
Okay.
found my PDF
Good. Stop saying PDF.
for the 6th of January 1979.
Okay.
And Dick Turpin got a lovely cover on the
It did.
TV Times,
it's a
didn't he?
beautiful cover with Richard O'Brien and a horse and a big weapon.
Richard who?
Richard O'Brien. Richard O'Sullivan.
Close, but no cigar.
Richard O'Sullivan.
That's the one. But there are actually two Dicks visible on
There
ITV
are, yes, right.
this day. As at 5:15, you had Dick Barton, Special Agent from Southern Television,
Yes.
which I've just had a look at,
Yes.
and I think we ought to get.
I think we do.
Then Mork and Mindy at 5:30, The Incredible Hulk
It's only on for a quarter of an hour.
at 6. Dick Barton is only 15 minutes.
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So The Incredible Hulk at 6.
I always hated The Incredible Hulk.
Well, all
It's
right.
that sad music at
Yeah.
the end, isn't
Paul
it?
used to be scared of it, so
Did
yeah.
he? Oh, okay.
7 o'clock, Celebrity Squares. Bob Monkhouse with Frank Carson, Barry Cryer, Sasha Distel, Diana Dawes, Jenny Hanley, Don McLean, Francoise Pascal, Willie Rushton, Percy Thrower, and the voice of Lance Percival.
Always Willie Rushton, though, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think Willie Rushton just lived in the studio.
In the middle,
Yeah.
waving.
Yes.
7:30 is Dick Turpin.
Okay.
So yeah,
Prime time.
real prime time.
Prime time on a Sunday.
And the feature film at 8 was Zeppelin. You rolled your eyes at that.
I did.
Why?
Yeah.
Have you seen that before?
I think I might have seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I never get the whole putting like a film on. 'Cause
Alright.
Somebody puts a TV Times thing up the other day for when the series of Upstairs Downstairs came back,
Yeah.
and it wasn't on until 9:50.
Okay.
Which seems really late, but they put a film on early in the night. So why not put like Upstairs Downstairs on when the film was meant to be on, and put the film on when Upstairs Downstairs was meant to be on? But anyway.
Right now,
Yes.
we've got Paul and Nick and Joe
Yes.
all together, who are going to look at season 17 of Doctor Who.
Or particularly the first two series
Well,
of season
we
17.
were going to look at season 17,
Yes.
but they got so overexcited
They did.
that the actual running time is the equivalent of about 2 episodes around the archives.
Yes.
So I've got my scissors out
Yes.
and hacked it down, and we're going to do Destiny of the Daleks and City of Death,
Yes.
because those were the two that were opposite
The Strike.
the strike. So Destiny of the Daleks will be on first, and
Yep.
City of Death
Will
a
follow
bit
on
later.
I was basically there in sort of coming up to September 79 on a high. I grew more and more and more and more, and I think 17 was a very personal, significant. But autumn 79 was a nice one because there was a lot of good TV. During, I think, November time, I met you for the first time.
Indeed, yes.
My first memory of Andrew Candish, who Andrew and Lisa will remember from RPS and the films, is perhaps in his Doctor Who scarf. I can't remember, but he would.
Yes.
He was with a group of people, and he turned to them and said, "We haven't got much time. The Nymons are coming." And I remember that trailer. I remember there was another one which featured Creature from the Pit with saying, "The Lady Adrasto will want to question you." And I thought, right, so when is this coming up? Paul, Destiny of the Daleks.
It's pretty much, I always say it's the first Doctor Who story I remember. I think I probably saw the repeat as well, which is why it's sort of fixed in my head better than I don't have the same quality of memories for the whole of the series, so the whole of the season. But yeah, I liked Destiny at the time, and I still like it to this day. I think there's a lot of really eerie bits in it that I still like, when Romana's walking through the city with all the shiny walls and everything, and I could watch it today, and I've probably still got the same feeling where I'm thinking, something's going to come around the corner.
It is an electric moment. Although I just love the fact that you've got this black glass wall for no other reason for the Daleks to mash it as a cliffhanger.
Yes.
But it's just so lovely. It is a lovely moment.
And so Terry Nation.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of keeps the pace well throughout the whole story. And if I was going to sit down and choose between watching Genesis or Destiny, I'd always choose Destiny before Genesis, partly because it's 2 episodes shorter, but I don't see any. I probably prefer Destiny over Genesis, to be honest. I think you know that of me anyway.
Oh yeah, Joe, Destiny of the Daleks.
Yeah, I mean, even as a kid, I kind of thought Romana's regeneration was a bit lame. It's very silly. It's a sort of silliness that worked in later Douglas Adams, but yeah.
I have to say, that tall one that comes out, I didn't actually think she was real when I first watched it. I think they're just a dummy they.
It's good thing you didn't choose that one.
No, but yeah, when she finally appeared, actually the costume she had was very good, even though she keeps stripping off the scarf. But to its credit, it throws her right in the action, and that works quite well. At the time, as a kid, I enjoyed Destiny of the Dark. When I review it, you can't help but notice that what's his face is clearly deaf because Tom Baker keeps pointing.
Yes, Ali. Whenever we watched that story, Ali, because she does sign language, Ali, and she actually. I think that is actually really clever of Tom, kind of to visually kind of cue him.
Yes, and very bad of the editor and the director to not edit those bits out. So it's bloody obvious some points. Tom Baker's look over there.
Yeah,
yeah. It's an odd beast because it does feel like a sort of recipe of a very lacklustre Dalek story. I mean, Terry Nation has done something quite different. Oh, I say Terry Nation. Robert Holmes did something quite different with Genesis of the Daleks. It just seems to be a revert to form, a little bit controversial, but yeah, it does feel a bit like we've been here before.
I
Except Davros is in it.
Maybe with Genesis, I think Bob sort of concentrated on the character of Davros, whereas with I always felt with all of Williams and also later on with Cartmel, they looked a bit awkward bringing old stuff back.
Yeah.
It was they're very much eras that like to move on and do something brand new. But I have to say, though, going back to Romana, I do think that Lalla Ward is probably one of my favourite Baker companions. And I have to say, every time I see that coat of that wonderful pink coat with the scarf, white scarf, I actually feel a nice warm feeling. That costume, there's something very warm and friendly and smart about it, and she all the companions, I think she had the best wardrobe, as it were.
Yes, I have thought this, that actually in terms of now in 2019 with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, actually she probably should have taken a leaf out of the book of Lalla Ward's.
Absolutely.
In terms of costumes.
Because Jodie looked a lot better in Peter Capaldi's coat.
I kept thinking that a female Time Lord perhaps should dress like Lalla Ward did in State of Decay.
Yeah, and I like the Movellans. And of course the Commander, played by Peter Straker, was a great good friend of Freddie Mercury.
But again, that's perhaps the problem with the Movellans is the very 70s. Very disco.
Oh yeah, but I do like the Movellans. They give the story a visual identity.
Yeah,
and their ship is nicely designed. I really like that.
That's
that visual
quite a good
effect.
Yeah,
on the Movellan ship is great.
It's interesting to look very disco at a time that was perhaps a bit more punk.
Yeah, but that's a very clever that way. Yeah, it's a good visual effect as well. If anyone's phoning in, it is Terry Nation.
Yeah, although to be fair,
I actually say Ken Greaves' direction is really rather good on it. It's got a lot of energy to it.
It's just it feels the script needed a little bit more work, but especially as a season opener.
One of my favourite quarries.
Yes. And of course it's been used in the Blake 7 episode games as well.
And of course I can't help but mention, from a design point of view, the ropiest set of Daleks for a long time.
They are quite funny though. I mean, there's the one that goes hiccup. Completely opens up in part 3. I agree with Paul though. It's got some. I agree with you that Terry, we've seen it before. He was just about to zoom off to America at the time.
It
And
has
I think-
I like the premise. Is very interesting. Again,
Yeah.
about Descaro and rediscovering Davros. That's a very interesting premise. It's just sadly the rest of the story doesn't necessarily follow through on the initial promise.
I have to say that with Davros, aesthetically, I think it was quite nice. And at the time, I thought, "Ooh, Davros,"
Yeah.
because I remembered him from watching Genesis first time round, and the thrill of as a 10-year-old, the thrill of actually seeing, "Oh, he's coming back," and I remember him. So I and the cliffhanger where he comes to life is very nice.
Every single cliffhanger of Destiny, I think, is really good, and
Cliffhangers, it does extremely well.
Yeah.
sometimes you just want that sort of story.
And of course, it was getting technical here. It was actually the first story to use Steadicam, which was brand new at the time. And Ken Greaves, a wonderful grizzled Scotsman on the. It has got a nice pace to it, but I would say it hasn't quite got enough meat on the bone.
No.
Look, compared to some of the other stories around that time.
Tom picking up a piece of slime, saying, "Oh, it's an original."
It's
That is quite.
No, that's a
poor.
bit of toy thing that was available at the time.
Yes, it doesn't quite work.
Yes. But I little trivia things here. The first time I heard of Destiny of the Daleks, it was shortly before transmission. They had a Blue Peter thing on about, I think it might have been about the Daleks, and they said, and if you're a fan, you'll be delighted to hear that they're back in a new story, Destiny of the Daleks. So the title stuck in my mind. And I actually had a dream that the Target book was out before the show, and you could tell I'm a Jeff Cummings fan because it had in the dream it was the like purple star scape of the then brand new cover to Three Doctors, with a picture of Tom from Horror of Fang Rock in the centre, both of which were Jeff Cummings pictures. So, but yeah, that was going to be Destiny of the Daleks, and of course it did come out early, but not before the end of the
Daleks don't go.
First Andrew Scaletta drawing.
Yes, indeed. I have a copy at home.
Oh, I like the Target books. The other funny bit is we're also in the trailer when Tom says, "If you're supposed to be the superior race of the universe, why did you try coming after us?" And when he goes bye like a Dalek, I actually did think that was the Dalek saying bye bye. Bye. Okay, at 10 you don't question these things.
But it is a moment of silliness that sort of perhaps belongs to death to the Daleks.
Yeah, I mean I think the Mo Vallens definitely are one of the highlights of the. But I think it's slightly lacking in characters as well. You've got Tyson, and you've got the David Yip's character, and
the Chinese detective.
The Chinese detective, and the manager of one of your favourite armchair thrillers.
Yeah, but then you're not necessarily supposed to realise that the Movellans are as bad as the Daleks almost at the start. So it might be more obvious as an adult, but as a child, I wasn't. I remember thinking, these can't trust these people.
I actually think that the Movellans work a lot better as Terry Nation rivals to the Daleks. I think they actually work a lot better than the Mechanoids in the chase, because the Mechanoids are just trying to be Daleks, whereas the Movellans bring something new to the table. I do like those old sets as well. I like the idea of going back. I mean, you're probably nowhere near deep enough for because the bunker was supposed to be in Genesis.
Yes, quite.
I mean, if you think about the logistics, Davros would have fallen to pieces years ago. But yes, Tom and Lala really do.
Yes, the companion doctor thing works very well in that story. It's it's a kind of missed opportunity, I think, would be the way you'd look at it.
Given the script, I feel Tom kind of does push it along a bit, to give it some energy. And
he's well up for it. I mean, he's working well with a deaf actor.
Yeah,
clearly, he's really helping the blind along.
And of course, dear old Tim Barlow's gone on. He did the Tall Guy. He's blind man in Tall Guy. He goes, "Take my advice." He says to Jeff Goldblum, "Take my advice, go blind." Every woman I made love to has been Marlene Dietrich, or something like that. Yes, he's good, and he was in Hot Fuzz as well. So he's still going strong, and he got some of his hearing back as well. But and I like the old paper wrap stone business. That's quite nice.
Yes.
Although as Keith once said to me, you can't imagine it happening in Genesis. Paper wrap stone.
Because Davros having shot.
All
It didn't quite have the danger of Genesis, but it's watchable stuff. One thing, because I just I was taping them, although I wasn't. I think I taped the repeat, but didn't tape the actual transmission. I remember because my mum was aware of me taping them, and she said after episode 1, she said, "I don't think that would have made a good audio because there wasn't hardly, there wasn't much dialogue."
Yes.
Also, one thing with Destiny, Dudley is used very, very sparingly. Who's not there at all in part 4. I do think that's a shame. Because you could have papered over some cracks.
Yes, no, I do think with Destiny that's a missed opportunity. You probably needed a lot of aggressive script editing, which perhaps Ducky Adams wasn't quite up to.
I don't think he was interested enough in the Daleks.
No.
He was kind of, hence that I read a review once where it mentions that bit where he's talking to Davros for the first time, and he says, "Well, I better fill you in on what's happening since you've been dozing." And he goes, "Beetlejuice won the code," and Davros interrupts him. And somebody wrote, "The Davros and Terry Nation ignore them and get on with the story." One final thing that springs to mind is that odd scene in part 3 where they bring in the prisoners and exterminate them one by one until the Doctor agreed. He's a bit of a bastard in that, isn't he? Because he lets 2 of them be shot before.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yes, that's true. Yes,
and also the pain thresholds of each person that gets exterminated seems to be completely variable. Because you've got
yes,
in
they all go black and white. What more do you want?
We've got Ronson in Genesis and Archer in Resurrection of the Daleks.
Yeah,
they all thrash about and chew the furniture and these it's a shot and it's like, "Oh, am I done yet? Oh, nice cosy place to sit down."
That's right. Yes, they get exterminated and fall over in slow motion.
Yeah. Especially the gown. Oh, right, right on cue. But no, I mean it is quite fun.
Thank you very much, boys.
Yes, thank you, boys. Yes.
So Nick, Joe and Paul will be back in a while. Next up, Warren joins us on the sofa to look at The Legend of King Arthur.
He does.
And after that, Martin returns to look at
Shoestring.
Welcome back to the sofa, Warren.
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hello again, Warren.
Letting me being had on the sofa.
And today we've shown you 2 episodes of The Legend of King Arthur
Yes.
from 1979.
Yes.
This is October the 7th, which was a Sunday.
Yes, and it's a BBC series.
It's a BBC serial, broadcast at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
And adapted by Andrew Davies, music by Dudley Simpson, producer Ken Riddington, director Rodney Bennett, although on the DVD packaging for some reason it says directed by Andrew Morgan, so somebody's got confused.
Somebody's got confused.
But starring Andrew Burt and Maureen O'Brien.
Yes.
Which is why we had to watch episodes 1 and 2, because she's not in episode 1.
She's rather good, isn't she?
She is. Yeah.
But yes, so what do we think of this then? Because I have no memory of seeing it, and I honestly don't think I've seen it until today. So what about you?
I don't think I've seen it either. No.
I think I remember the sword in the opening titles. That is it.
Yeah.
That is literally it.
Yeah, because we start with the sword sort of rotating.
Yes.
When I first saw it, I thought there was really bad tramline scratches on the film, but it was actually the sword.
Yeah.
But I said to you, this is pitched really interesting because this is the Sunday Classics slot.
Yes.
And I think when people say Sunday Classics, they immediately think of Dickens adaptations, don't they? And people tend to forget that there was a fair bit of fantasy stuff. But this is almost pitched somewhere between sort of the BBC Shakespeare production of the time and Jackanory Playhouse, as I said.
Well, I was saying to Lisa, I think it's far too rich to be a Sunday classic. I think it's got a bit more oomph than your average Sunday classic.
I think it does have the problem that we do know Monty Python and the Holy Grail and things like that. So inevitably you were starting to quote scenes like that. But the way they've done it with absolute conviction.
Total conviction.
And historical accuracy as well. Because it's, according to the Wikipedia entry, it's sort of meant to be 8th century.
Yeah.
So, and it's, I mean, because I said to you, the opening and closing themes are done by Dudley Simpson, but it's the most un-Dudley Simpson music I've ever heard him do.
But the opening music especially does sound as though it's from the time, doesn't it?
It's very sort of accurate.
There's no concession to making a sort of jaunty theme tune or anything like that.
No.
It's much more mood music, isn't it? And frankly, I wouldn't have recognised any of this as Dudley.
No.
Because you hear him working on other shows and you immediately go, oh, that's Dudley Simpson, isn't it? But this time, it wasn't what you might call typical Dudley.
No.
So that was interesting. But, yeah, I mean, the first episode is very much the setup, isn't it?
Yes.
So we've got Patsy Kensit.
Yes, as the young Morgan Le Fay.
And I have to say, she's damn good, isn't
she?
she?
I have to say, they say never work with children and animals. She's absolutely cracking, isn't she?
She is,
So if you just want to explain what the setup of this first episode is.
This first episode is it's partly concerning Uther Pendragon, who is Arthur's father. And if anybody's seen the more recent series of Merlin, Uther's in it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's how, because obviously Uther steals another man's wife.
Yeah.
Because he wants to marry her, and Morgan Le Fay is the child of his wife and this other person, so she wants revenge on Uther and she wants revenge on Arthur, and you can totally understand that. It makes her a sort of sympathetic character, but in another way, obviously you're rooting for King Arthur because
the legend that goes with Arthur, isn't it?
Yeah. So the first episode is basically setting up that story. Half of it is before Arthur is born, and the other half is when he grows up and he goes off to the wherever it is and becomes king.
But
and he's not even turned into Andrew Burt at this point.
Yeah, but Merlin turns up.
Yes.
And what's the gap between episodes 1 and 2, do you reckon?
I don't know, because obviously it's a different... Because the actor playing Arthur it's like a younger version, and then in episode 2 it's Andrew Burt.
Yeah.
It's got to be a good 10 years, really, I would have thought.
15 years.
Said more than that,
Yeah.
But I, as I was saying, I love Merlin's perpetuating flowing beard.
Yes.
It's just timeless and endless, isn't it?
If I had the time, I'd end up with one like that.
Yeah. And the actor playing Merlin, this is a very similar part to... He's in...
this is Robert Edison.
Robert Edison. He's in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and he's the Templar Knight in the...
I couldn't
in the
class,
temple.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
and it's very similarly played with the beard.
Absolutely,
and everything.
spot on.
That's
now,
interesting.
yes.
I wonder if there's some sort of connection. I wonder if somebody said, "Oh, he'd be good for that part because he was."
It's a
Merlin.
very small part.
Yeah, but you're right. It's quite a similar sort of otherworldly part, isn't it?
Knew I couldn't place him.
So, and I always, when I watch that, I always think, where have I seen him from? So I'm now wondering if I did see this series, and that's where I recognise him from.
Because I don't think
I don't think I've seen him in anything else.
Because it's only just... When was it out on DVD? Not long ago.
Not too long ago.
Let's have a look on the back, see what it says. It's a Simply Media job, copyright 2016.
So 3 years ago.
It's only recent. And Merlin is about 300 in this, he says, which is interesting. Because the whole thing about the sort of the Arthur universe, isn't it? I never can quite get a handle on what Merlin's powers are meant to be from sort of, depiction to depiction. Because I always said to you that the thing about the sort of BBC Merlin, the recent one, that disappointed me, that they were going for a young Merlin.
Yes.
And I always think Merlin's much more interesting when he's old. So, but he clearly doesn't age between episodes 1 and 2, whereas everybody else does.
No. So. But he wouldn't if he's 300 years old. There's a certain point you're going to stop.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, you're interested in seeing the rest of this now.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And I think it sort of comes across.
I don't think it punches above its weight at all. In fact, I think it opens up so many possibilities, and some of the actors that I've watched on the 2 episodes there, I've only ever seen them in, say, lame 70s dramas and things.
Yeah.
And here they are. It's if they walk onto a completely different plane, and the quality they are giving, even for the Sunday afternoon classic, is amazing.
I do like the way they totally throw away the sword in the stone scene, though.
Yes.
Whereas in some sort of adaptations, it's the big sort of dramatic thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, he just wanders in,
Pulls it out.
and goes, "What's this then?"
Yes.
Yeah, is this sword all right for you? Yeah.
Because he's just looking
And
for a sword.
everybody
isn't he?
kneels on the ground. What are you doing on the ground?
Yeah.
Put the sword back.
Yeah, so
As if he's broken it, isn't he?
yeah, it's just such a wonderful matter of factness about it.
Yeah.
And I sort of laughed and said to you that, it's all done with magnets, isn't
Yes.
it? You know, because it's one of those things that if I was to write a sort of King Arthur thing, those sort of scenes are the things I'd need to understand in my head how the physics of it work.
Yeah.
Because it's never explained.
No.
That's the thing. That you watch other adaptations, and even Monty Python, The Holy Grail. You've got these scenes that you expect to be in them.
Yeah.
But this has already totally wrong-footed me.
Yeah.
That there's things that you recognise are there,
Oh, yeah.
but they're given a completely different spin. And I like that. I like that freedom to adapt the legend,
Yes.
because it's not historical
No,
truth or
and
anything
the set
like
piece
that.
you're expecting to be a set piece just isn't.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's
It's just
yeah.
background, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So I think that's
Wonderful.
fun.
And I do like the fact that you obviously in episode 2 you get Lancelot introduced and Guinevere, and there's lots of little looks between them. So they're sowing the seeds now of what's to come, and if the kids at home won't really realise, but the parents will be sort of nudging each other and going, "Oh look," because I think it's sort of based on Morte Arthur.
Yeah, which I don't know at all. No.
Which is Mallory, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and of that story. So, but yeah,
I haven't actually seen much Maureen O'Brien stuff beyond Vicky and a few episodes of Casualty.
No.
And it's surprising how much she has done, I think.
Yes.
I never saw her in Casualty. This is literally the only other thing I've ever seen her in.
Yeah, but you said she's still recognisable
Oh,
as
absolutely,
Vicky,
yeah,
isn't she?
absolutely.
Because it's about 14 years on.
13 years,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
she
13,
leaves
14
in
years.
She
65.
still has
Yeah.
the angelic face, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where she's going to go with this part,
Yes.
because I think it's something she's probably
get
going
her
to
teeth into.
get her teeth
Yeah.
into. Because
Yeah.
even for the cliffhanger to part 2, she
Yes.
was already starting to do the real sort of, sort of supervillain stuff,
Yes.
wasn't she?
And she wasn't-
Lots of eyes and teeth.
Yeah.
Yes, but it wasn't over the top, was it?
Yeah,
It was
no.
very, very contained, and it was quite sinister, and you're
Yeah.
thinking, this is not going to be good.
But yeah, a pretty solid production all round, I thought,
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah,
And it's more historical than I thought it was going to be. It's described as a fantasy. I would describe it as a historical
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah,
myself.
I'd go with that.
Because there's only a little bit of fantasy in there.
Well, the fantasy, I think, was being added. If they'd have given us to a separate track, we'd have been doing Python
Yeah,
quotes on it.
well, that's the thing.
But, yeah.
There you are. Nice solid job, I thought.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right, and now we've just got one more thing to do.
Yes.
Right.
And that'll be your sort of potpourri of bits and bobs
Yes.
for this episode. So
Yes.
see you in a bit.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Sometimes a popular television series is hard to like. Everybody else is going on and on about just how great it is, and you sit there feeling perplexed because it does nothing whatsoever for you, and you begin to wonder whether there's something wrong with you because you're so far off track with what the rest of the world seems to find quite enjoyable. Game of Thrones did nothing for me, and I've never felt the need to watch Call the Midwife, Line of Duty, Happy Valley, or Strictly Come Dancing, despite the viewers being drawn to all of these like bees to honey. Several of those strike me as looking too bloody miserable or too bloody family whamly for me to ever want to see them, but if they make other people happy, then so be it. I'll just slip another DVD into the machine and leave them to get on with it, whilst I wallow around with some telly from a different era and try to fathom just what it might have been that made these shows the unmissable viewing of their times. Which brings us to Shoestring, a fondly remembered detective show starring Trevor Eve, found lurking at the back end of the 1970s and the dawn of the 1980s, a series which staggered through 21 episodes across 2 years before vanishing forever and being replaced with Bergerac for the remainder of the 1980s. It's a little bit of a Marmitey series, to be honest. Some people really liked Shoestring, but some people never really took to it, and it's easy to see why. It is, after all, based around local radio and gives it a Beeb-related self-importance that few of us might recognise, and it does also come across as being a tiny bit smug from time to time, but perhaps because it was 1979 and the series launched during the ITV Strike, so that there were literally no other channels to watch apart from BBC Two, and it faced little to no competition, at least at first, Shoestring became very popular indeed. For reasons outlined in the first episode, Down on His Luck Private Investigator, Eddie Shoestring ends up becoming the private ear for Radio West, and this becomes the trigger point for the various stories which result from listeners ringing in and having him look into their crime-related problems. So far, so snoopy and possibly so bloody irritating. But then, with a backstory of mental health issues, a bright red, or if you prefer orange, Mark III Cortina estate, and some parts of Bristol that I have a burning nostalgia for, well, really, what's not to like? Well, I suppose that all depends upon how much you like Shouting Trevor or not. To be fair, the Shouting Trevor of Waking the Dead is very much suppressed throughout much of the run of Shoestring, although it does surface from time to time until everyone remembers that he's supposed to put a lid on his anger because of his therapy. And because I was very influenced by things on the telly around that era, due to being that sort of age back then, I do think that perhaps subconsciously I modelled my look, minus the moustache, I'm not insane, on Shoestring as I staggered through my college years. Kicking off on September the 30th in 1979, when there was nothing much on ITV due to the strike, the opening episode is called Private Ear, and is very much the origin story for a series which would end its original 2 series just before Christmas the following year, with Eddie slumping down on a sofa, having just saved Christmas in a Christmas-themed episode a mere 15 months later. And because Shoestring is based around a radio station, let's go through the first episode as a top 20 chart rundown. In at number 20 are the opening credits, created by Name to Conjure with Sid Sutton, in which, once the Radio West fanfare has trilled, a sombre bluesy number plays as Eddie mooches around a chilly-looking Bristol, having been transmogrified by the power of radio and split screenery, so we get to see a tiny glimpse of the inner workings of the magical world of radio as he dozes on park benches, blows on his chilly hands, and becomes fascinated by pillar boxes, and has a snack as new high-tech dot matrix signs tell the people of Bristol just how chilly it is. Alright, at 19 is Flippin' Stacey Dawning. The former child star horse botherer playing, how could we forget, Sarah Marshall. She's picked up by a red Morris Marina taxi at the Bel Air Sauna, the kind of backstreet dive frequented by old gentlemen, not half. Sarah wears dark glasses as she leaves and goes home, far too tired to chat to Laurie the taxi driver, played by Patrick Durkin, as, rather surprisingly, he listens to the local radio station, Radio West, as it seems does absolutely every other person in the series, despite that bloody jingle and the essential dreariness of DJ David Kahn's radio show. Hang on, that voice is familiar. It's only William Bloody Russell. With him in the pilot, this thing's bound to run for 50 years, okay? Sarah Marshall, you won't have forgotten, runs a bath whilst listening to David droning on about old soldiers and the like, the crazy young thing that she is. Then, despite being very tired, know what I mean, gets called back to work for a super important special job, which means she heads out in a ghastly pink coat, and we get a close-up of her amazingly shocked eyes. Alright, in at 18 is I Don't Wanna Be Like David Kahn. In the studios of Radio West, David Kahn broadcasting his late-night nonsense to the West Country as Don Satchley. Michael Medwin arrives to do his boss of the radio station shtick, which does at least lead to the unexpected sight of that lovely Mr. Chesterton from Doctor Who flicking the V's straight down the camera lens. At home, Sarah Marshall, remember her, tries to make an angry phone call, then runs through the streets to Radio West, where we meet Liz Crowther's lovely but never at home receptionist, who takes Sarah's name, whatever that might be, and tries to get David Kahn to come out and talk to her. And when he refuses to do so, she heads outside singing the current gritty drama hit of the day, Bar Stewards. At 17, it's Sad Sarah. This is the last we see of the unforgettable Sarah Marshall, as she nicks a white Rolls Royce from the radio station's car park, which arch-narcissist David Kahn has permanently tuned to his own show, apparently. And as David drones on with marriage guidance advice and sniffs at his signature yellow rose, Sarah Marshall, who's that, knocks back the booze and pills and drives to the beach, freeze-framing on a close-up once she screamed the last line of that Bar Steward song, Bar Steward all of them. A catchy little ditty, right? And her body lies on the beach next to the Rolls Royce of David Kahn, for it is his the following morning. At 16, Eddie Goes to Work, Part 1. Eddie Shoestring starts his latest working day by coming downstairs and swiping the morning paper from under the very letterbox of his landlady, prosecuting attorney Erica Bayliss, as played with a will they, won't they, spoiler alert, they will, charm by Doran Godwin. Their domestic arrangements seem very fluid as they discuss his prospects, or lack of them, his lack of petrol, office, and clients. There's then a strange little interlude as he goes out, intercepts the postie, and a jump cut from him posting the letters through the door, himself, and the toast popping up from the toaster in their kitchen, and we see that the sad story of the fate of Sarah Marshall, remember her, has made the front page. In at 15, it's A Sad Day at the Morgue, and there's the sad interlude of the sad parents having to make a sad visit to the sad mortuary to identify a sad little body of their sad little girl, and we hear the sad tale of a sad teenage runaway. Kenneth Gilbert and Sally Sanders play the sad Nolans, these sad parents of sad Sarah Marshall, who was once, presumably, one of the sad Nolans. But then we return to 16, and Eddie Goes to Work, Part 2, as in a bizarre edit, having gone out earlier, Eddie is now back in the kitchen with the radio on, shaving over the sink and quirkily choosing to wear his pyjama jacket as a shirt whilst discussing Erica's imminent appearance on Radio West, which establishes a connection which might prove jolly handy in driving the plot along and bringing disparate worlds together. Alright, back at 15, Sad Day at the Morgue, Side 2, the inquest into the death of Sarah Marshall, whoever she was, opens and is adjourned, and we hear this on the radio news bulletin as Sonia is wrangling her typewriter in the lobby of Radio West, and because Sonia is brilliant, a trait which goes criminally unnoticed throughout, that name seems awfully familiar to her from a certain late-night encounter in that very reception not so very long ago. At 14, it's Dodgy David. Arriving at the radio station, Erica parks her car next to that oh-so-familiar white Rolls Royce and is soon on air with an unnamed presenter, Stuart Bevan, and all of the radio business about producers and so on seems a little bit like one of those writers' research sketches that Mitchell and Webb used to do, really. So, there's a phone-in featuring the suddenly vanishing Keith, and Erica gets Ash questions about legal aid. Meanwhile, following up on Sonia's David and Sarah connection, Don is having a meeting with David in which we find out that the chap who played that lovely Mr. Chesterton in Doctor Who is actually playing a bit of a wrong-un in this, and that Don has received angry letters and has recordings of angry phone calls. We discover that David is a bit of a one for the ladies because, even though he's just been on the carpet, he's already eyeing up Erica through the glass as he declares that he had nothing to do with Sarah Marshall's death, which cuts to a lovely and moving scene between her parents in their anonymous hotel room. At 13, it's Eddie's the Man. Don Satchley is having a post-interview coffee with Erica, where he brings up the matter of ethics surrounding his #1 broadcaster, Lord help him, and she suggests, ta-da, that he might employ a private investigator to look into the situation, and it looks as if our worlds are about to collide, and our series is made. Eddie is is lounging around on the knackered old boat which apparently saved his sanity, but which is also rarely seen again. It's supposed to be his private space, but she barges in anyway with this offer of work, and despite the fact that he claims to be busy, she points out that he's lying down, which leads to a lateral thinking zinger. But he does end up meeting Don in a bar built inside an old lightship, where they discuss a backstory of 4 marriages as Eddie Shoestring doodles caricatures on the back of beer mats. It's his art therapy, don't you know, and probably saved his sanity, and admits that his name really is Shoestring and that he's had to double his fees because of it. Oh, the witty banter and wordplay is really flowing now, isn't it? Anyway, he agrees to look into the background of the dead girl for him, so that's nice. At 12, it's oily pinstripes. 2 dodgy businessman types in ghastly suits and seedy officers played by Sean Arnold as Mr. Tony Henry and Brian Miller as the nervous Mr. Willis, discussing the story in the newspaper, those dark secrets, and to nobody's real surprise that the Bel Air sauna is really a front for a call girl service. At number 11, it's dodgy geezers in another bar, which may or may not be more of a party boat, or the same bar redressed. Eddie meets the jazz-loving dodgy geezer Len Tilly, played wearing a fedora and overcoat by a not-yet kinvig Tony Haygarth, who used to employ Sarah Marshall when she first moved into the city. He tries to be amiable as he explains his investigations, but the conversation takes a dark turn as he does another of his doodles and is threatened. But he does manage to fob off the proposition made by 2 of Len's girls by the deft repositioning of a handbag. Eddie then meets one of the sinister businessmen in the lobby of a classy but seedy hotel, and we get to hear the backstory of how Eddie used to be an executive zombie and his subsequent breakdown, the smashing up of a computer, being carted off to a lunatic asylum, his analysis, and how drawing helps keep him sane. The businessman, Mr. Willis, then counters all of this backstory by trying to bribe Eddie, which doesn't work. In with a bullet at 10, investigations. Eddie then breaks into Sarah Marshall's apartment and mooches through a photo album, which includes several other familiar faces, including Len Tilly, and in another poignant scene, is interrupted by her mother, who has come to sort out Sarah's things, and Eddie has to pretend to be a policeman to explain why he's there. Eddie then meets up with Laurie, the taxi driver, who drove her home once or twice and has no axe to grind, seeing her profession as just one of the ways of the world, no questions asked. Anyway, for a tenner and a swift portrait for the wife, it looks nothing like her, ho ho, Eddie is finally pointed in the direction of straight in. At number 9, it's the Bel Air sauna, where the dodgy businessmen are nonplussed to discover that this thorn in their sides has just booked in and is asking questions. And so, whilst the rather lovely and helpful Barry, Richard Domfer, arranges to meet with some information in 15 minutes, bad things then naturally happen to Barry as he is overheard by Len in his two-tone shoes and also by his burly henchmen, and Barry, the one-hit wonder, is never seen again. At 8, only Eddie could go to the Chinese. Eddie heads out to buy a Chinese meal and is intercepted as he waits for his sweet and sour by the sweetly sour Len and his henchmen. And whilst nothing at all happens in the Chinese takeaway apart from some sinister threats, Eddie ends up being driven, bag of takeaway still in hand, in a car late at night to a meeting in an abandoned, much vandalised railway carriage. There, he meets up with the sinister Mr. Tony Henry, who explains that this city is owned by businessmen and run by businessmen, in a tedious interlude which somehow proves that nothing ever really changes to stave off the boredom. Eddie draws Henry's face in the muck on the windows and makes some remarks about big fleas and little fleas, as he is being told in no uncertain terms to back off. Naturally, he is beaten up, but not killed, by Len's bouncer mate, and the next we see of Eddie is him arriving home looking slightly the worse for wear, but still bearing his now very cold takeaway, which needs reheating, and hoping that Erica can bend her ethics enough to give him the address for the car number plate he's noticed and memorized. At 7, it's the Filthy Potter, in which Eddie meets an ever-so-flirty young pottery student who seems to be rather enjoying her other life as a call girl. At 6, it's At Home with David Kahn. Eddie visits David Kahn in the garden of his house, and we know that winter is coming as he turns up his jacket collar as David tells him all about his relationship with Sarah Marshall and how she knew where he kept the spare key to his Rolls Royce. At 5, in at the deep end, Eddie meets Mr. Tony Henry at the swimming pool of the private sports club, all this is happening from, and he threatens him with Sarah's little black book that he retrieved from her flat, and with a rather subdued prototype of the angry Trevor acting we would see later in several episodes of Waking the Dead, he chucks him into the pool, noticing a list of companies on the wall as he departs at 4. It's snowing in London, as Eddie finally meets Sarah Marshall's father, who, it turns out, in one of those tragic twists of fate that can only happen in these sorts of drama, was the urgent appointment that Sarah Marshall was sent out to service on that fateful night. It all gets rather poignant, in a way, as we learn about their history and his remorse over the whole terrible incident. At 3, it's Private Ear, as Eddie sketches his own silhouette around the Radio West 324 logo and announces to a frazzled Don Satchley that David is indeed in the clear, and he's not going to tell him why he knows this, even though Don's still planning on packing David off on holiday, never to be seen again. Meanwhile, none of the Radio West executives have managed to come up with any decent ideas for programs to fill in for him. Sonia, of course, connects the dots, looks at the modified logo, and suggests a new program idea of her own, which means, bubbling under the top spot at number 2, it's That Program Idea in Full, as David Kahn hands over to unnamed presenter played by Stuart Bevan, who basically reads out the program pitch, or Radio Times listing, for the entire series, with Eddie Shoestring about to join Radio West as their very own Private Ear. So, if you've got a problem, just call
27272
right now. So that's episode number 1 of the series, Shoestring. That's Private Ear by Robert Banks Stewart, rewritten from a rejected script by Richard Harris, which caused him to leave the series, and directed by Dougie Camfield. The main problem for me in this particular introductory episode is that it seems to try rather too hard to be self-consciously quirky, several of which seem to be set up precisely to make Eddie seem far more interesting than he actually is, and many of them which seem to get forgotten about as the series progresses, unless one of the writers happens to pick that particular trait as a hook to hang a story on. And boy, does Eddie Shoestring have some quirks. There's the rumpled suits and the ratty ties, the pyjama jackets worn as shirts, the rather lovely but knackered red car, the fact he had a breakdown after working as a computer programmer, the fact that he's a part-time cartoonist, the fact that he owns and sometimes sleeps upon a boat. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, he also sometimes wrangles a yo-yo. You see? Quirky. Do you get it? Quirky. And writ large, his quirkiness is, too. That and the on-again, off-again relationship he has with his landlady, Erica, leads to the general air of quirkiness, too, as he doesn't have the sort of proper home life that the rest of us do, but one of those TV detective home lives that's quirkily abnormal enough to make him interesting and lovable, and makes enough of the viewing demographic want to take care of him. The theme tune, starting with that Radio West fanfare before segueing into something far more jazzy and moody, is nice enough, and has that film noir mean street sleaze vibe to it, which seems to be the kind of feel the series seems to be aiming for from time to time, with Eddie channeling the kind of down-at-heel gumshoe popularised by Raymond Chandler and his pals back in the day, although similar pastiche noir ground had been trodden by Nicholas Ball as Hazel the year before, so there's nothing too innovative about that really, other than it's been given a bit of a BBC polish and pushed out as something new and quirky and innovative. An astonishing array of guest stars turn up in this too, alongside that rather impressive if much underused main cast, including the likes of Harry H. Corbett, Shirley Ann Field, Christopher Biggins, Philip Bond, Diana Dawes, Michael Craig, Toya Wilcox, Bert Kwok, Roy North, Linda Bellingham, Gordon Kay, Sylvia Coleridge, and a whole load of people who would end up as EastEnders one day. Some of the supporting cast of sidekicks really are terribly underused though, which is something of a shame, but perhaps if they were planning to make further series, those characters had more interesting storylines lined up for them, which were not to be. So here I find myself pondering upon Shoestring, broadcast on the BBC over those two series in 1979 and 1980, and I do have to remind myself that it was very popular indeed, so much so in fact that when its star Trevor refused to make any more and go off and pursue his stage career instead, the BBC had to sit down with its producers and come up with something similar but different, and because, as I mentioned earlier, that something turned out to be the phenomenally successful Bergerac, and it all turned out rather well in the end really, given that Jim Bergerac did have his own set of quirks but fewer of them, so lessons had obviously been learned. And of course, Shouting Trevor would get back on the BBC eventually with the long-running Waking the Dead series, in which he got to shout a heck of a lot, so all is ultimately forgiven in Tellyland. But Shoestring is something of a curiosity its egg of a series. Good in parts, sometimes very good indeed, and even when it does fall towards the risible, it's still a terrifically watchable series, one which I found myself devouring all 21 episodes of in slightly over a fortnight earlier on in the year. So it can't be all that bad, can it?
Thank you very much, Martin.
Yes, thank you, Martin.
And he will be back
You will.
very soon.
Yes.
Well, next month, because I know what he's doing already.
You do.
We've decided.
You do.
So, to round off, two more things.
Yes.
City of Death
Yes.
from the Salisbury Boys.
Yes.
And Warren joins us yet again to look at Worzel Gummidge.
Yes.
So we'll say thank you and see you all soon then.
Okay then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The thing is, one of the reasons I like Doctor Who is the stories are such rip-snortling fun. No, basically, the thing that struck me about City is I didn't actually see any pre-publicity, no trailers, nothing. It was just open the radio time, City of Death, a title I'd never heard before. They visit Paris. Oh, novelty. So it's novel all the way.
Yeah, so first overseas shooting.
And I actually came out with an expletive when Scaroff takes his face off the first time, because I was just whoa. And that is still one of my favourite cliffhangers. I mean, it's just so nice because it got a total symmetry.
Yeah.
Because you've got the Scaroff, the Jaggeroth at the beginning of you think, how does this figure with all the stuff that's going on in Paris, which is nice and intriguing anyway. And then, clever. And then nice, shocking end cliffhanger. In fact, all I have to say, all three cliffhangers are absolute blinders.
Yes.
And Julian Glover is just perfect as Garleone. He's witty and charming and evil, and he plays a sort of, you can, as he says, you can see Scaroff's point of view because he's trying to bring back the race, and it's just cracking good story. And I must admit, when I rushed home from a children's party, that was Andrew Cook. Do you remember Andrew Cook?
Oh, indeed. Andrew Cook and Mark Slade.
Mark Slade. It's Mark Slade's birthday party. I rushed back to watch part 2 of City of Death. But no, and I think that was a favourite of Mark Slade. So he obviously sort of, after the party, he obviously turned on to watch episode 2.
Yes.
Catherine Schell, gorgeous as the Countess.
Yes.
Very nice indeed, and still going strong, and I'm on Facebook with her. I haven't really talked about City of Death because she's more interested in talking about her dogs or whatever. Or
Shame.
Space 1999. But,
Shame.
And the heady days when you could actually smoke on TV.
Yes, there's a hell of a lot of smoking in that, yes.
But there should be. It's Paris, and it's the Paris in the 70s. Who hadn't got a fag on? Actually, and it was it was just nicely conceived.
Yes.
And one mustn't forget David Fisher in all this, because he actually created the story and then, of course, had to give up because the personal reasons. And Graham Williams and Douglas Adams locked themselves in Michael Hayes's house and basically rejigged the whole thing and did a marvellous job.
I have to confess, my favourite thing in the whole of City of Death is Duggan.
Yeah.
He's superb.
He is great fun, and I've met Tom Shadbourne. He's a great guy.
My only regret is that he doesn't actually continue as a companion, because I keep thinking he would work so well.
I think in terms of male companions, he's amusing. He's a great character, has some great lines, and works so well with Tom's Doctor.
Absolutely.
But he is to a degree a one-trick pony.
I think Duggan would have worked quite well in Creature from the Pit.
Yes, hitting the guards.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Alan Walker could have gone off and been captured and done the whole...
Don't worry, Doctor, I'll knock the creature out.
And Doug could have hung around with Tom and sort of gone, I'll punch him.
Yeah. He certainly would have got stuck into the bandits, wouldn't he?
Exactly, he would have worked quite well, Creature. It would have been interesting.
But, back in the room, my favourite character was Kerensky, because he was such a nice little old fella. I was actually quite sort of when he gets turned into a skeleton.
Yes. Yeah.
And I actually I had a dream about between episodes 3 and 4 that Tom spent most of the last episode trying to turn him back again. And of course, because I suppose because I wanted for him to come back, and he even Scaroff sort of keeps always prevents him from doing it. And he even draws a diagram for Duggan and Romana. And interestingly, in the dream, Scaroff does away with Herman when he's no longer of any use. But of course, it was very much the reverse.
And put a laughter track on City of Death. No one's done that before. But somebody had.
Good.
I have to say, talking of laughter, though, I would have to say, if ever I'm having a bad day, I just remember that first scene in part 2 where Tom comes in and plays the fool, and and he's working off the Countess is very serious, and it's just beautiful dialogue. My dear, I don't think he's as stupid as he seems. My dear, nobody could be as stupid as he seems. It's just lovely attack, and it's just brilliant.
It's almost Troughton-esque,
And
actually.
I love that. Also, the set design. I love that machine. And in fact, when a month after the repeat, I joined. I went to Highbury, and we had history of Mrs. Parrott.
Oh, good lord!
And one of our first things about history was to design a time machine. And sure enough, I think I put a couple of prongs in there from that machine. I couldn't help myself. But and of course, a quick word about James Goss's brilliant novelisation, which is
I've not read it, but
it's great.
Yeah.
It really does it justice, because it also goes. It has the courtesy to go back to David Fisher's original story as well, and incorporate some things.
Oh, right.
And Douglas Adams, and it's kind of it's a very faithful to all renditions.
Well, I find it's interesting in Doctor Who stories in that it's for a series about time travellers, one that's actually interested in playing around with time.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen very
Yes,
often.
that's very true.
Until later, New Who with the timey-wimey stuff.
Yes.
But it's in that area.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, in the book, although we see Kerensky aged to death in seconds on the screen, and Duggan and Romana and Scarlett only see him aged to death in seconds on the screen, in the book, you see it from the professor's point of view, and he's just stuck in the bubble for the rest of his life, and just sees time go slowly by. So in actual fact, in a way, it's far more horrific in the book, and it's very, very effective reading of it. And I have to say, Dudley Simpson, never better.
Yeah, I mean,
he's just superb throughout.
It's a very satisfying Doctor Who story.
Yeah.
Probably the best in the season.
For me, I think it would probably, if I had to go with a single story, I'd probably City.
Yeah, easily.
Good monsters, good, scary, funny. There's got everything.
Scary, funny. Tom's top of his form.
Yeah. City was one of the ones that, again, like Destiny. We were discussing this afternoon, weren't we?
I think it's another one that I remember better because of seeing the repeat as well. I agree with everything you say. I do think it slows down a bit about the beginning of episode 4. That's the point. Don't think episode 4 is half as good as episodes 1, 2 and 3, but I feel like they kind of like, okay, well, how are we going to sort this out? I think I go as far as to say it was a weak episode 4. So.
I quite like the fact that when things go awry and he randomly comes back to it's his butler that actually does him in because of there's a monster.
Things I like drawing on the fakes.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's a comedy moment that really, really works.
Yes. Yes.
It's just not. It's really nice, and I like the fact that you go back into history as well, and you've got that love again. All the cliffhangers are lovely, but you've got this whole the thing when Tancredi comes in and it's the same bloke.
Yeah, it's not silly humour. It's a kind of nice quirky humour that emerges in the story.
Yeah. It is, and all that lovely scene in part 3 where you see the different Scarecrows, and he links with all his superb.
That's just one of the bits with the thumbscrews.
Yeah, yes. How very discourteous when you've got the trouble of the thumbscrew.
It's that and wondering how did Scarecrow with one eye look at her 2 eyes, but
yeah, and also in years of marriage with the Countess.
That does beg some questions, yes.
Although it does explain it in the book that it's a sort of non-sexual relationship, which doesn't ring true with the way Julian Glover and but they're a lovely pairing.
Yes, but she might have noticed his scaly green spaghetti appendages.
Yeah, and presumably he had some spare masks because he completely sort of.
I know. Yes, yeah. It's a very nice model work as well, you've got to mention.
Yes, actually, Ian Scoons.
Yes.
In his last Doctor Who story, I believe.
Yeah,
the wonderful spider spaceship. Yeah.
Lovely. It's beautifully done. From a technical point of view, that's just one of the highlights of the story. Also,
it's a good grab at the beginning. You're expecting this story about Paris, and you've got primeval Earth. And,
yes.
And Scarroff, and that one, and you can actually see into the controls as well, which is nice.
Yeah, you know me. I kind of like that kind of story.
Yeah.
Leaps time zones and whatever it is. Yeah. Lovely.
Do you think it influenced you?
Yes.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. I do like the structure of City of Death. do like the very intelligent leaping of time zones that comes from out of the story.
Yeah.
Considering this time period, you also, if you compare it to, say, the other long-running series like Bond films, you've got Moonraker, which just leaps from place to place for no apparent reason whatsoever. Oh, Bond's in Venice. Really? I thought he's investigating space shuttles. That's, City of Death is much better structured than a 70s Bond film, which, considering how much money was spent on one compared to the other, that's quite a compliment.
It's interesting to see how many people at school seem to watch that one more than any other story I can think of, possibly because of the strike.
Well, yeah, because if he were not there.
Simon Batchelor at school, I overheard him have a conversation after episode 3 saying, "Oh, did you see that Chinesey man turn into a skeleton in Doctor Who?" Sorry, David Graham, I think you're supposed to be Russian, aren't you? But lots of clever ideas. But do you feel because I know you have a trouble with ends sometimes. You quite they disappoint you quite a lot.
Well, it comes down to being quite a simple way to resolve it all, considering how complex it sort of build up. But I mean, it still leaves it quite near the top of the season for me. But yeah, I think there are more flaws than people would care to see because
like the news. When he rips the seat, you can actually see the news.
because then it's probably something I've come to over time myself.
Yeah.
I think this is probably it doesn't get judged very harshly because of being how good it is, but it's not flawless. But,
yeah, if you were to go in depth, you could probably. But on the surface, as a Doctor Who adventure,
I mean,
well, what would you change?
One thing I would do, and this is totally out of Michael Hayes' control, and that is, I'd let the sun come out in Paris. Paris looks very drab.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
It's bank holiday, and I think it's been snowing or teeming with rain. But it's very. It looks very dreary, and the Paris in the sunshine would have been nice, but
this is Paris in the 70s.
you don't really care with Dudley's music following you through. Tom, Lala, super. I mean, Julian Glover just is such a quality bit baddie,
and Duggan is such a great assistant.
And finally, Warren.
Yes.
It's Worzel Gummidge, A Home Fit for Scarecrows from the 4th of March, 1979.
Mm-hmm.
Good fun, I think.
It was good fun, that was.
Yeah.
So this is all about Worzel Gummidge stealing furniture, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
He's a tea leaf.
He is. Yeah.
Now, if you were the village Bobby and you got these reports of all these furniture being stolen and you found them in the middle of a field, which is eventually what happens, what would be your next sort of move to do?
I'd be looking for the house that was round it, that was stolen.
But yeah, we start off with it piddling with rain. They've got the rain machine out. And John and Sue are visited in the caravan by Worzel.
Well, outside the caravan.
Yeah, he's never allowed in,
no.
because they've got an electric fire, which he considers dangerous.
Electric is bad and fire is connected to the two are worse enough. Yeah.
No, but the reason they won't let him in, or that John won't let him in, is because he's all muddy.
He's just covered in shite, isn't he?
Yes.
And you sort of watch this back and you think, what a hero for kids this is. Because, he's dirty, he's muddy.
He's really abusive as well to people.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who they are, he's just abusive to them.
And then he's just a thief.
Clear off then he's going, isn't he?
So, but we also get our first sight of the singing head.
Yes.
Which is in
a
barrel of water, just pickling it. I just thought it had rotted, not pickled. unless it's like really salt water.
We did say they wash their heads in salty water.
Yeah, all right, okay.
So-
Twice a year, isn't it? Or something?
Yeah.
I was just amazed that you've got a scene with two kids watching while he decapitates himself.
Yeah,
and puts a fresh head on. I mean, that's wrong.
Interestingly, though, in this episode, you don't actually see the head come off because he wiggles it about and then sticks it in the barrel of water.
Yeah,
and just comes up with the new one. So you don't actually have a headless body scene. That's a little later. I mean, obviously you will get those.
That's horrific, though.
Yeah. And then we get a bit of what I would regard as time wasting.
Yeah.
As we get Pertwee singing a song.
Yes.
Or, as you always used to say, Lisa, speaking a song.
Speaking a song, yeah.
Because this is how to speak Worzelese.
Blatant padding.
Yeah, W were O were R were Z were E were L was L, and so forth. Which, of course, is based on the theme tune.
Yeah.
Yes.
And does come out as a single as well.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
Warren,
well.
you said you saw the musical version.
The stage show.
Yes,
of this.
it was at Her Majesty's. This was years before the Phantom of the Opera started making that its home. But yeah, I remember going to see that. Yeah,
And have you got any memories of that, or not really?
I was just encapsulated by John Pertwee.
Yeah.
He was just amazing. It was just the main set for me, as I remember it, is just the farm and the caravan, and then the two children come on, and the adults leave them behind, and they just go up to the field, and there he is.
Yeah. But Worzel then sort of wanders around the village nicking furniture.
Kleptomaniac.
Various, including a huge grandfather clock that he's probably broken.
Now it's the master's TARDIS. He's getting his own back.
Yeah, and a big sort of table from the sort of cafe.
The tea room.
Tea rooms or whatever.
When he takes it up and puts it in, do you like the fact that he's actually stolen a doorway as well with a door in it?
Yes.
Oh,
He
yes, I
uses
saw
his
that.
back door.
But again, I was sort of thinking, over the course of the series, Worzel gets up to various sort of no goodness, if that's such a term, in the village. And would you have thought that people would start to recognise him after a while?
I think they would have done, yes.
Yeah.
The village Bobby's totally inept,
Yeah.
isn't he?
And of course, you've also got Michael Ripper as well.
Oh, yes.
In this
Yeah.
one. And what was it you said, Warren? Is there anything that Michael Ripper's not done?
Yes, has he never been in anything in the 60s and 70s?
Because Talking Pictures TV are currently showing Freewheelers as well. And we'd not really seen Freewheelers.
Hadn't
No.
you?
No.
Oh,
No.
it's a joy to behold.
With Ronald Lee Hunt and his unconvincing
Arr.
disguises. But yeah, so interestingly, no Crowman in this episode
no, he's
either.
not in every episode, is he, the Crow Man?
I
So.
just thought that was interesting that Worzel and the kids basically sort of carry this episode between them, don't they? Yeah, you get a few other characters, but nobody's got a huge part, if you'll pardon the expression.
Are any of the villagers returning characters out of interest?
I think they must be. Yeah, I mean, obviously Michael Ripper comes back
Yeah.
a fair bit, but yeah, I think you sort of keep an eye out. You'll probably notice a sort of repertory company of villagers. And
He
things
must
like
live
that.
in the southern area then, so from Freewheelers to Worzel, isn't
I
it?
don't know. That's a good point, actually, because this is all southern stuff. Isn't it? Yeah.
And I think he might pop up in Dick Barton. I can't remember because you remember. I remember you mentioning Dick Barton.
Yeah, well, we will investigate Dick Barton shortly, hopefully.
When it arrives.
But watching this episode on DVD, it really does show up what a state the actual DVD
yes.
releases are in. There was bits where it was just so grimy and muddy, the film, and dark, and you
very
really,
dark.
really can't see what's going on in some of the shots.
And they have managed to clean some of it up. But at the moment, I believe there's no interest in a remaster of the film brushes because they've got all the original film brushes.
Yeah, but as I said to you, what's interesting that of the things that we've chosen to look at for 1979, 2019 sees a relaunch for Worzel Gummidge.
Yes, they are. I don't know if they're still making it now, but they've been doing it over the summer.
Well, they've just announced some of the cast, haven't they?
Apart from Mackenzie Crook.
Yes, and Michael Palin certainly sounds interesting.
Yes. As the Green Man, not the Crow Man.
Yeah, and as you said, Lisa, are they going for an Aunt Sally closer to the books?
Looking at the
possibly?
actress they've cast, I believe they are, yes.
Because again, Worzel says he's going to get married in this episode and maybe have kids. And it's interesting the way he says about like turnips can grow up to be scarecrows. Because there's a scene in one of the books where he's teaching turnips. He's pulled a load of them up out of the ground and he's holding a little school for scarecrows, and he's just sort of teaching things to the turnips, and at one point he sort of goes off and he says, right, you lot can carry on learning by yourselves. So the idea that the turnips are sentient in the first place, that they've got some intelligence, because we never really go into the sort of birth of a scarecrow in the series, do we?
He says about the furniture the furniture doesn't have feelings except for beds
because they're made of straw.
Yeah,
or mattresses are.
So it's this weird sort
if it grows out the ground, it's sentient.
Yeah, and I've said before, how does the whole Worzel's memory thing work with him swapping heads? Because if he takes a head off and swaps it for a different one, that new head has got the memories of the previous head. So has he got some sort of cloud-based storage thing that he uploads all the information to some sort of Crowman net or something like that?
Well, he does say in this one, because they obviously rescue him from being arrested, and he says he'll remember it. He'll put his remembering head on in the morning,
assuming that he remembers to put the remembering head on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fairly sort of disposable episode because again, we haven't got Aunt Sally in it. She turns up in the next episode.
But I did like the sort of the bit at the end when they all go off dancing. It sort of makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, doesn't it?
There was a very warm feeling.
I mean, it does push it more a bit towards the stuff that John Pertwee likes. Yeah. You can tell this is now a series,
but it's tailored
for him.
Yeah.
As you've got the sort of song and dance stuff as well, and it does become a little bit more.
And he gets to do
musical,
his voices,
doesn't it?
And slapstick.
Because he's, as you say, you noticed he's the voice on the radio. Right at the start, doing his sort of Inferno voice thing. It was more sort of, I think it was Irish.
It was Irish,
accent. But yeah, we need a voice on the radio. Get Pertwee to do it.
Well, then it saves hiring somebody else for a really small thing.
But yeah, a lovely little episode. There's nothing too special. But yeah, I mean, this whole series, perhaps we should go back doing it in order one day.
Yes.
I don't think we have. We just watched random episodes generally, haven't we?
You can do that.
And it probably repays, doing it in the right order. So maybe one day we'll see. But there you go. There's Worzel Gummidge, and there's 1979 done.
Yes.
And I think it's true to say that we could have done several episodes of this podcast just about 1979.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the list of stuff that I've had to leave off has been amazing.
Yeah.
Quite often you said to me, leave off.
Yeah. Leave it. Don't touch that. Yeah. Leave it alone. But Martin's poem at the... Don't touch that, Warren. Martin's poem at the start. There's dozens of shows we haven't even gone near.
You forget how much new stuff there was in 1979.
Yeah. So, just 1 year. And maybe we'll repeat this one day with a different year.
Yes.
But for the moment, we'll say thank you and see you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye. That was episode 40 of Round the Archives.
Starring Lisa Parker, Andrew Trowbridge, Warren Cummings, Martin Holmes, Nick Goodman, Joe Bunsell and Paul Chandler.
On the musical side, you heard Dan Tate and Paul Chandler.
The script for Shoestring Privateer was by Robert Banks Stewart.
And the producer was Robert Banks Stewart.
currants and gooseberries are the pickings from Mr. Smith's fruit garden. At the same time, 125.